Dean Martin received a letter about a dying child's final wish. What he did next was kept secret for 30 years until the truth finally came out, proving that the greatest acts of kindness are often the ones nobody knows about, and that true compassion requires no audience except the heart that needs healing. It was Thursday morning, November 18th, 1971, and Dean Martin was in his Beverly Hills home office sorting through the usual pile of fan mail when his assistant, Margaret, handed him an envelope that was different from the others. The handwriting was shaky, obviously written by someone who was struggling just to hold a pen, and the return address was Children's Hospital of Los Angeles. Dean had been receiving fan mail for over 20 years, and he had developed efficient systems for responding to the thousands of letters that arrived each month from people all over the world who wanted to express their appreciation for his music, his films, or his television performances. Most letters received from autographed photographs, while particularly touching or unique correspondence sometimes merited personal attention. But something about this particular envelope made Dean pause before opening it. Maybe it was the careful way his name had been written, or the fact that it had come from a children's hospital, or just an instinct that told him this letter was going to be different from anything he had received before. The letter was from 8-year-old Timothy Chen, a boy who had been diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia 6 months earlier, and whose doctors had recently told his parents that there was nothing more they could do. Timothy had perhaps 2 weeks to live, maybe less, and he had asked his mother to help him write a letter to Dean Martin because he wanted to tell his favorite entertainer how much his music had meant to him during the hardest time of his life. "Dear Mr. Martin," the letter began, in the careful handwriting of a child who was putting all of his remaining energy into forming each word as clearly as possible. "My name is Timothy, and I am 8 years old. I am very sick, and the doctors say I am going to die soon. But I wanted to write to you because your songs make me feel better when I am scared or when the medicine makes me feel bad." Dean felt something tighten in his chest as he continued reading. Timothy wrote about how his parents played Dean's records in his hospital room, how That's Amore made him smile even when he was in pain, and how listening to Everybody Loves Somebody helped him remember that he was loved by his family, even though he was going to have to leave them. "I know you are very busy and famous," Timothy continued, "and I know you probably get a lot of letters from people who want to meet you. I don't want to bother you, but my mom said maybe you would like to know that your music helps sick children feel less afraid. If you ever have time to write me back, I would like that very much. But if you are too busy, I understand. Thank you for making such beautiful music." The letter was signed, "Your friend, Timothy Chen," and included a small drawing of a smiling face next to a musical note. Dean read the letter 3 times, each reading making him more aware that this 8-year-old boy was facing something that no child should ever have to face, and that he was doing it with a grace and thoughtfulness that many adults never achieved. Timothy wasn't asking for anything, except the possibility of a response, and he was even considerate enough to acknowledge that Dean might be too busy to write back. But Dean had no intention of simply writing back. He picked up his phone and called Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the head of pediatric oncology at Children's Hospital of Los Angeles. Dean had met Dr. Mitchell the previous year at a charity fundraiser, and he remembered her as someone who was completely dedicated to her young patients and realistic about the challenges they faced. "Dr. Mitchell, this is Dean Martin. I received a letter from one of your patients, Timothy Chen, and I was wondering if you could tell me about his situation." Dr. Mitchell remembered Timothy immediately. "Timothy is one of our most remarkable patients," she said. "He's been incredibly brave throughout his treatment, always thinking about other people, even when he's in significant pain. His parents are wonderful people who have been trying to make his final weeks as comfortable and meaningful as possible." Dean asked about Timothy's condition, his treatment, and his prognosis, and Dr. Mitchell explained that while Timothy was receiving palliative care to keep him comfortable, His cancer had progressed beyond the point where curative treatment was possible. She estimated that Timothy had perhaps 10 days left to live. "Dr. Mitchell, would it be possible for me to visit Timothy? I'd like to do it quietly, without any publicity or media attention. Just a visit from someone who was touched by his letter and wants to spend a little time with him." Dr. Mitchell was surprised by the request, but immediately understood its significance. "Mr. Martin, that would mean the world to Timothy and his family. When would you like to visit?" Dean cleared his schedule for the following afternoon and drove to Children's Hospital of Los Angeles in his personal car, wearing casual clothes and sunglasses to avoid being recognized. He asked the hospital staff to keep his visit completely confidential, explaining that he wanted this to be a private moment between him and Timothy, not a publicity opportunity or media event. Dr. Mitchell met Dean at a side entrance to the hospital and escorted him through back corridors to the pediatric oncology ward. She explained that Timothy's parents, David and Linda Chen, had been told that a special visitor was coming but hadn't been told who it was, and that Timothy had no idea anything unusual was planned. Timothy was in room 314, a small but cheerfully decorated space that his parents had filled with drawings, photographs, and small toys to make it feel as much like home as possible. When Dean walked through the door, Timothy was lying in bed listening to music on a small radio, his thin frame making him look even younger than his 8 years. "Hi, Timothy," Dean said softly. "I'm Dean Martin. I got your letter." Timothy's eyes widened with surprise and disbelief. For a moment, he seemed unable to speak, as if he couldn't process that the person he had written to was actually standing in his hospital room. "You're really Dean Martin?" Timothy whispered. "I'm really Dean Martin," Dean confirmed, sitting down in the chair next to Timothy's bed. "And you're really Timothy Chen, the young man who wrote me the most beautiful letter I've ever received." Timothy's parents were standing in the doorway, and Dean could see tears in their eyes as they watched their son's face light up with joy, despite his illness and exhaustion. "I can't believe you came to see me," Timothy said, his voice weak but filled with wonder. "I thought maybe you might write me back, but I never thought you would actually come here." Dean spent the next 2 hours with Timothy, and what transpired in that hospital room was more meaningful than any performance Dean had ever given to any audience. He sang Timothy's favorite songs, told stories about his career and his famous friends, and listened with genuine interest as Timothy talked about his family, his dreams, and even his fears about dying. Timothy asked Dean about Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., and the other members of the Rat Pack, and Dean shared funny stories and warm memories that made Timothy laugh despite his pain. Dean also told Timothy about his own childhood, his early struggles in entertainment, and the people who had helped him along the way, creating a conversation that felt like two friends sharing their lives, rather than a celebrity visiting a sick child. But the most remarkable part of the visit was when Timothy asked Dean if he would sing "That's Amore" one more time, explaining that it was the song that made him feel closest to his Italian grandparents, who had passed away before he became sick, but who had always told him that music was the language of love. Dean sang the song softly, sitting close to Timothy's bed, and for those few minutes, the hospital room was transformed into a place of pure joy and connection. Timothy sang along when he had the strength, his small voice blending with Dean's in a duet that no recording studio could ever capture. When it was time for Dean to leave, Timothy had one more request. "Mr. Martin, could you sing to the other kids too? There are other children here who are really sick, and I think they would love to hear you sing." Dean's heart broke at Timothy's selflessness. Even facing death, this 8-year-old boy was thinking about other children who might benefit from a moment of happiness. Dean spent another hour visiting other young patients in the pediatric ward, singing for children with various illnesses and bringing moments of light to families who were dealing with unimaginable challenges. He sang lullabies to toddlers, upbeat songs for older children, and offered words of encouragement to parents who were struggling to stay strong for their sick children. The hospital staff was amazed by Dean's presence and his genuine care for every child he met, but they honored his request for complete confidentiality. No photographs were taken, no press releases were issued, and no publicity was generated from what became known among the staff as the most beautiful afternoon in the hospital's history. Before leaving, Dean asked Dr. Mitchell if there was anything Timothy needed, anything that might make his final days more comfortable or meaningful. Dr. Mitchell mentioned that Timothy loved music and that his parents had been trying to find a small piano or keyboard for his room so he could play the simple songs he had learned before becoming too sick to attend school. Dean made arrangements that evening to have a professional-quality digital piano delivered to Timothy's room, along with sheet music for all of Timothy's favorite songs and several books about music theory and composition that Timothy had mentioned wanting to read. But Dean's generosity went beyond material gifts. He arranged for a music therapist to visit Timothy daily, someone who could help Timothy express his feelings through music and who could teach him new songs during the time he had remaining. Dean also established a fund to ensure that Timothy's parents could remain at the hospital full-time during their son's final days without worrying about lost income or medical expenses not covered by insurance. Timothy Chen passed away peacefully 6 days after Dean's visit, surrounded by his parents and listening to That's Amore, played softly on the piano Dean had given him. His final words were, "Tell Mr. Martin, thank you for making my music so beautiful." Dean attended Timothy's funeral, sitting quietly in the back of the church and leaving before anyone could recognize him or ask questions about his connection to the family. He continued to support Timothy's parents financially and emotionally for years afterward, helping them establish the Timothy Chen Music Therapy Foundation, which provided musical instruments and therapy services to children in hospitals throughout California. The story of Dean's visit to Timothy remained a closely guarded secret for over 30 years. Timothy's parents honored Dean's request for privacy. The hospital staff maintained their confidentiality agreements, and Dean never spoke publicly about the experience. The truth only came to light in 2003 when Dr. Mitchell was retiring and wrote a memoir about her career in pediatric oncology. She included the story of Dean's visit as an example of how small acts of kindness could have profound impacts on sick children and their families. When reporters contacted Timothy's parents for confirmation, David Chen said, "Dean Martin gave our son the most beautiful final week of his life. He didn't do it for publicity or recognition. He did it because he read a letter from a dying child and couldn't stand the thought of not responding with everything he had to give." Linda Chen added, "Timothy died believing that he mattered to someone famous and talented, that his life had meaning beyond our family, and that his love of music connected him to something larger than his illness. Dean Martin gave our son the gift of knowing that he was loved by the world, not just by us." The revelation of Dean's secret visit to Timothy had a profound impact on both the public and the entertainment industry when the story finally became known. People who had admired Dean Martin for his performances suddenly saw him in an entirely different light, as someone who had used his fame not for personal gain, but for private acts of compassion that he never intended anyone to know about. The Timothy Chen Music Therapy Foundation, which Dean had helped establish and continued to support anonymously for decades, had grown into one of the most effective pediatric support organizations in California. By 2003, when the story became public, the foundation had provided music therapy services to over 8,000 seriously ill children and had established music therapy programs in 15 hospitals throughout the state. Dr. Mitchell's memoir revealed additional details about Dean's involvement with the foundation that even Timothy's parents hadn't known. Dean had not only provided the initial funding, but had also arranged for numerous other celebrities to contribute time and resources to the organization, always insisting that his own role remain completely confidential. Frank Sinatra had made several unannounced visits to children's hospitals under the foundation's auspices, singing for young patients and never speaking publicly about these experiences. Sammy Davis Jr. had donated instruments and equipment to the foundation's music therapy programs, and Joey Bishop had arranged for television and recording industry professionals to volunteer their services for the foundation's benefit events. What made these contributions remarkable was that none of the Rat Pack members had ever discussed these activities with each other or used them for publicity. Each had been approached individually by Dean, who had explained Timothy's story and asked for their help. The foundation's success in helping seriously ill children had also influenced medical practice throughout the pediatric oncology community. Dr. Mitchell's memoir described how music therapy had become a standard component of treatment protocols at many hospitals, not as an alternative to medical care, but as a complement that helped children cope with the emotional and psychological challenges of serious illness. Research conducted through the foundation had demonstrated that music therapy could reduce children's need for pain medication and improve their cooperation with medical procedures. These findings had influenced treatment approaches at children's hospitals throughout the United States. The foundation had also established scholarship programs that enabled young people who had survived serious childhood illnesses to pursue careers in music therapy. One of these scholarship recipients was Maria Santos, who had been a patient in the same pediatric oncology ward where Timothy had been treated. Maria had received music therapy through the foundation's program during her cancer treatment and had decided to become a music therapist herself. "I never knew that Dean Martin was the person behind the foundation that helped save my life," Maria said in an interview after Dr. Mitchell's memoir was published. "But it doesn't surprise me. The foundation always felt like it was run by people who really understood what sick children needed, not just what looked good on paper or what would impress donors." Dean's approach to supporting the foundation had been characteristically thoughtful and practical. Instead of simply writing large checks, he had insisted on understanding exactly how the money would be used. He had also required detailed reports on the foundation's activities. Margaret, Dean's longtime assistant, revealed that Dean had maintained a private file of letters from families whose children had been helped by the foundation. He had read every letter personally and had often followed up with additional support. "Mr. Martin never talked about the foundation work," Margaret wrote, "but I could always tell when he had received news about a child who had been helped by the programs, because he would be in an especially good mood for days afterward. He got more satisfaction from knowing that a sick child had smiled during a music therapy session than he did from any professional achievement." The foundation's work had also extended beyond direct patient care to include support for the families of seriously ill children. Dean had established programs that provided counseling, financial assistance, and respite care for families. These family support programs had helped thousands of parents remain at their children's bedsides during treatment, and had provided siblings with emotional support to help them understand what was happening to their brother or sister. The foundation had also created memorial programs that honored children who had died from serious illnesses by establishing musical instruments or music therapy programs in their names. These memorial programs helped families find meaning in their loss, while ensuring that other children would benefit from the memory of their loved one. Timothy's room at Children's Hospital had been permanently dedicated as the Timothy Chen Music Therapy Room, where the piano Dean had given to Timothy was still used daily for therapy sessions with young patients. A small plaque near the piano read simply, "In memory of Timothy Chen and all the children who find healing through music." Dean had visited the Timothy Chen Music Therapy Room several times over the years, always quietly and without announcement, to observe therapy sessions. These visits were never publicized, and Dean always insisted that they not be mentioned to the media. When Dean Martin died on Christmas Day, 1995, the Timothy Chen Music Therapy Foundation received hundreds of donations from people who wanted to honor his memory by continuing his work with seriously ill children. Timothy's parents, now in their 70s, continued to volunteer with the foundation and to speak at fundraising events. They often concluded their presentations by playing a recording of Timothy singing That's Amore that had been made during one of his therapy sessions. The story of Dean Martin and Timothy Chen had become more than just an account of celebrity generosity. It had become a reminder that the most meaningful acts of compassion often happen in private, without fanfare or recognition, and that true kindness requires no audience except the hearts that need healing. If this story of secret compassion and quiet generosity moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Share this with anyone who needs to know that the greatest acts of kindness often happen in private, with no audience except the people whose lives are changed forever. Have you ever received kindness from an unexpected source during a difficult time? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more incredible stories about the moments when celebrities use their fame not for attention, but for healing hearts that desperately need hope.